Hi, my name is Eugene Baldovino, and I'm here to tell you that Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice was a misunderstood cinematic masterpiece that was just way ahead of its time. This film critique is filled with spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film, please bookmark this video and watch it after. Before I get started, did anyone else notice there was odd symbolism suggesting that Bruce Wayne's ancestors had a dark past as slave owners? Batman is using human branding on criminals to oppress them. He uses a chain to drag Superman like a prisoner. All day he has an assistant that refers to him as a master,
Master Wayne,
which basically means owner. And Bruce Wayne even reveals that the first generation of the Wayne family made their fortune in the fur trade,
trading with the French. Pelts, skins.
which is a business historically involved in slavery. You can even argue that Wayne Financial could represent modern slavery to big business. Anyway, that's just conspiracy theory stuff. Batman v Superman has really deep AF hidden meaning in its story. In this video, I'll show you how Superman was just as evil as Iron Man based on the philosophy of Socrates, and I'll prove how in this movie, Batman is a manifestation of Nietzsche's philosophy of Der Wille zur Macht, will to power. Oh, look at my abs. Let's start with the title. The movie, after all, is called Dawn of Justice, not Civil War. Civil War sounds more in your face and straight and to the point, while Dawn of Justice sounds more quiet and cerebral. The majority of conflict in Batman v Superman is philosophical rather than physical. Something philosophical inside Batman's head is twisting and turning, while Tony Stark has something external happen to him and he reacts without much reflection. Batman's gaze inward is what Socrates believed was needed to improve one's life. There's an interesting contrast in the movie between the two superhero rivals. Superman wants social acceptance and pleasure with Lois, while Batman chases after death. He embraces pain and thrives in social rejection. Basically, Superman wants things that make most of us happy, while Batman wants what most would see as things that make us suffer. Socrates revealed that Superman's will was initially misguided, believe it or not. That is until the end, when Superman turns his gaze inward and chooses to sacrifice himself to stop Doomsday. Socrates felt that the gaze inward, the attainment of self-knowledge, led to happiness, not the things that necessarily make us feel good. He called this the one supreme good. Batman stopping the rampage of death and allowing Superman to live is a more virtuous act than Iron Man trying to kill Captain America for protecting a friend who killed his father. When Batman discovers Superman's mother has the same name as his own mother, that self-knowledge of his love for his own mother allows him to relate to his enemy. At that moment of virtue, Batman's spirit is uplifted far beyond Iron Man's spirit for revenge. For Socrates, virtue is moral excellence. It's beyond fear of death. It's beyond survival. It's about an awareness of what's just and unjust, where everyone possesses the will to do evil or good. Socrates reasoned that it is better to suffer an injustice than to commit injustice. When one commits injustice, the soul is harmed, the true self. But when we suffer an injustice, the true self is not harmed, but only our possessions are harmed. Our wealth, reputation, physical body. That's what's up, compadre. When Superman obeys Lex to fight Batman, he does that so he can become happy. This is very simple to understand. It's a similar reasoning Iron Man goes off to fight Captain America in order to feel uplifted, but this is false happiness according to Socrates. Those are acts of evil. The nature of evil to Socrates was the result of ignorance. An individual who commits an evil act is unaware of the one supreme good, the inward gaze. In order to attain that false happiness, one will use evil to achieve their goals. That is pretty flipped up if you think about it. One will use evil to achieve their goals. It's a common belief that a great individual is one who overcomes their innate evil thoughts and are able to develop their inner peace. But an ancient philosopher named Heraclitus believed that war is common and strife is good. He used the metaphor of a bow where the string is pulled back and there's tension. Once it's let go, it snaps back into place. Tension always existed before the bow was even pulled. Heraclitus believed that all humans have that strife in them. Heck, you may be one of the millions of people who ragged on Batman v Superman and are watching this video right now completely angry that I'm making fun of the beloved Captain America Civil War film, but maybe you agree that the much hated Batman v Superman might be legit. Being able to hold those two opposing viewpoints in a stable state of harmony is called justice. The German philosopher Nietzsche had a similar take on what made a great individual. To him, it's one who has powerful internal conflict where evil passions and good desires are constantly in a state of war. And through that war, one gains insight, wisdom, and strength. This is the key to developing one's der Willis or Macht, will to power. Batman certainly has wisdom, insight, and a propensity for violence. In this latest incarnation of Batman, he defeats criminals by doing criminal things, stealing things, and shooting people, and blowing up private property. And through those actions, he does gain insight and strength. Lex Luthor is confused on what knowledge and power is.
Having knowledge with no power, because that is paradoxical, and
Superman is confused about what his father wants. His father sees him as a god, but Superman sees himself in relation to Zod, just another Kryptonian. Superman's perspective is that he's simple, humble, just another creature of the universe. Those internal conflicts I've described are subjective problems. The philosopher Kierkegaard, who's known as the father of existentialism, focuses efforts on understanding subjective truths, lived experience rather than objective truths, scientific explanations. Batman subjectively sees himself as a criminal who's going against society trying to force order out of chaos. Batman objectively sees Superman as chaos, responsible for destroying a city and harming his people. But Batman's perspective flips when he has an objective viewpoint of himself and sees Superman in a subjective view, as another creature of the universe with the same mother. Well, specifically, their mother has the same name, but in the grand picture, we are all children from the same stardust. This is a hardcore life lesson with total emotional charge. Compare that to Tony Stark, who's unwilling to get out of his subjective view.
He's my friend. So was I.
Kierkegaard believed that most men, like Tony Stark, are subjective towards themselves and objective towards others. But to eradicate despair, he believed that one must be objective towards oneself and subjective towards others, like Batman. Socrates thought the masses were full of poop, brainwashed by cultural norms, and never contemplated the ideal way to live, which is pretty much Superman's conflict throughout most of the movie. Rebelling against the masses is Batman. He's described as a vigilante. Senator Finch had limited power on her own, but she gained strength through the combined force of a community of authoritative people that influenced its society. She believed in the will of the people, but in the end gets blowed up. Lex Luthor called her out and used the peach tea as a metaphor. The senator was stuck in her way of thinking, which was ultimately a delusion. The peach tea was psychologically terrifying. It was meant to shake up her thinking. Kierkegaard was very much into the idea of the single individual and thought it was pretty weak that most seek to lose themselves and escape into a crowd to be something. Superman wasn't raised by his biological parents, and the father figure who raised him was violently killed. Superman was basically ejected from his home planet, so he has a massive sense of loneliness. The only thing that keeps Superman from being alone are the love of his mother who raised him with specific values, and Lois Lane who accepts his flaws. Kierkegaard felt that every human has anxiety of being alone in life, forgotten by God. Even though you may have family and friends to brighten your day, loneliness is an affliction that's still in the deepest parts of our hearts. Religion has an influence in the world of Batman v Superman. Many people believe that the meaning of life is located in another reality, outside of what you experience in daily life, a true world. For Christians, this would be heaven, a place of perfection, a superior reality. This superhero movie is a fascinating exploration into what would happen if a true world in a believer's mind started to become real for them in the physical world, where a God walks among men. Understanding this true world concept is important to being able to understand Nietzsche's philosophy of nihilism. We see background characters populate the world of the movie who have religious beliefs.
Creator of heaven and earth,
Have mercy on my soul.
And the Superman symbolism may even speak to many viewers watching the movie who believe in Jesus Christ. In a two-world existence, this reality is filled with constant change and problems, but there is another reality filled with stability and perfection. In many religions, this eternal true world is only accessible after the death of your physical body, and if you met certain requirements, your soul enters the eternal true world. Kind of like Valhalla, going to meet Odin. Not like the Thor movie by Marvel, but the History Channel Viking show. I like that show. That show's pretty cool. From Nietzsche's perspective, people who are religious,
he answers to no one, not even, I think, to God.
Believers in the true world fulfill two fundamental human needs. The first is that life has meaning, and the second is a need for self-esteem, a sense of importance. Lex Luthor questions the meaning of his life, his world. What is it all for? The purpose.
And knowledge is power. And I am... no, what am I? What was I saying?
Lex Luthor is a scientist who believes an ideal future can be had by science and technological progress. Nietzsche believed that the rise of science would challenge the religious view of the world where the meaning of life is already written. It's to serve God. Christian theory explains that our lives are for something, which is against nihilism. Those who don't believe in a true world, but have a mechanical view of the world, like Lex Luthor, they fall into despair, believing they live in a meaningless world.
The problem of you on top of everything else. You above all. Because that's what God is.
Bruce Wayne has boundless wealth. He owns successful businesses, but struggles to find meaning. Unlike animals, man needs to believe there is a reason to exist. This need for meaning causes much psychological suffering. Compare Bruce Wayne to Clark Kent, who's flipping eggs in his apartment getting hot and heavy with his chick all the time. He's one happy camper, but when he goes into Superman beast mode, he begins to wonder about the greater picture of the meaning of his life. This basic need for meaning is tied to the meaning of suffering. Why do we suffer? There's so much suffering all the way up until our lives expire and we end up dead. Pretty sad if you think about it. Batman has many nightmares. I don't get the sense that he's religious or even spiritual. I think it's safe to say that he doesn't believe in a true world.
They took me to the light. A beautiful lie.
Lex Luthor announces that God is good as dead.
Now God is good as dead.
Which parallels a statement by Nietzsche who claimed God is dead. During his time, Nietzsche believed that faith in religion was declining because of the dawn of the scientific era. And with this decline in the belief of the eternal true world, he felt that nihilism would take over, much like the world of Batman v Superman. Like I mentioned earlier about true worlds, what gives life meaning to many is that they are convinced in an objective truth. In other words, there is an intelligent design to life. For some, there's a superhuman figure that teaches the most ideal way to live. And many may also find purpose in a secular power, such as a political party, a celebrity, or even a war. Batman associates his life purpose with the city of Gotham, an environment that killed his parents and kept him wealthy. Lex Luthor's purpose is driven by war. He develops projects to destroy things that threaten his ideas and safety.
They need to see the fraud you are.
Superman's only real purpose is to love Lois Lane.
You are my world.
There's no belief in a god, no authority that guides him. Well, maybe his mother and memories of his earthly father. When one's purpose in life is obliterated, destroyed, a person falls into nihilism.
She was my world, and you took her from me.
When Lex Luthor loses Senator Finch's agreement to import kryptonite, he feels that life is meaningless and falls into nihilism. And when Wallace, the security guard, loses his ability to walk and can no longer perform his chosen profession in society, he too falls into nihilism.
What the do you want?
According to Nietzsche, when an individual no longer feels like they are working as a partner with the Almighty or transforming oneself into something special, they feel nihilism taking over their lives. Nietzsche believed that nihilism was a disease that an individual must purge themselves of, not the actual event that caused the pain and suffering, but the mental suffering. And not only that, one must use that disease as a learning experience to get to a more elevated stage in life. Through flash forwards, we see nightmare Superman who lost Lois Lane fall into a nihilism so deep that it becomes a monster. Nietzsche believed that many who fall into nihilism make the mistake that their purpose in life is meaningless. He thought that to be a massive mistake. Throughout the whole film, Batman was stricken with nihilism. You see it in the way he acts like a criminal in Gotham.
We're criminals, Alfred.
In a way, he's an example of a nightmare Batman. Oh! Bruce Wayne seems to dislike his human identity compared to his alter ego as Batman, while Superman loves his human form, but he's endlessly confused by his superhuman identity.
Superman was never real.
This admission of flaw in their thinking is the beginning of overcoming a nihilistic state, and there are two routes that people take, active or passive. Batman would be considered active while Superman is passive. In active nihilism, one moves on and destroys all beliefs that gave his life meaning. Instead of following the masses, they become a free spirit that's alone with the universe. Unlike Superman, Batman doesn't need a woman to make him happy. Batman is truly a free spirit and does what he desires. He shoots people, and he doesn't even obey God, or rather Superman. Batman even exclaims that he wants to bend the world into his own will.
The world only makes sense if you force it to.
By the way, I'm not advocating violence. I'm just explaining Nietzsche's philosophy. Superman appears to be quite the opposite. He can't overcome his identity as Superman and obeys the masses. But is that what makes him good? Another character who falls into passive nihilism is Wallace, the wheelchair-bound victim who can't gather himself together and becomes a suicide bomber, a part of Lex's mass movement.
What the do you want?
To help you stand for something.
Compare that to someone like Stephen Hawking, who managed to find a greater purpose in life and has helped humankind. When you look at Alfred the butler, he's a guy who has serious attitude problems.
I don't deserve you, Alfred.
No, sir, you don't.
Yeah, I know it's funny watching someone being cranky, but in reality, if you've ever had a job where someone is always cranky towards you and throws out a lot of backhanded compliments, for example, nice work so far on that project, but I can't believe you're still working on it, it's taking forever. Basically, it's a compliment with an insult thrown right underneath it.
I can't stay down here, Alfred.
Go upstairs and socialize. Some young lady from Metropolis will make you honest. In your dreams, Alfred.
That crap is a cowardly way of them trying to be dominant. You'll feel like you're in a toxic environment, which is the situation that Bruce Wayne is in with Alfred. There's a scene where Bruce Wayne is handing Alfred coffee. WTF, that's his job. There's some weird dynamic power shift going on there. Nietzsche believed that every being has unrealized potential, but most are prevented from evolving into a more powerful human because of fear and laziness. I'm sure that we all have friends who are extremely talented, but they never seem to get anywhere because of their mental roadblocks, and they end up living their lives like Alfred. I'm not saying that being a butler is bad. There are people who make a fantastic living doing that job with precision and attention to detail. But if your talents lie elsewhere and all you're doing is cleaning up after someone else, you could do more for the world if you took risks and developed that potential, that talent.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
Instead, some people take the easier route and devolve into being nasty.
The feeling of powerlessness that turns good men cruel.
Imagine you were riding your bike down the street, minding your own business, and some ripped dude flew down from the sky, took your bike and slammed it against the wall, and threatened you to stop riding your bike here or he'll bleeping kill you. Unlike Batman, I think most people would back down and most likely not show up in that neighborhood again. But Batman's inner voice is telling him that he should not be bullied.
Do you plead?
Nietzsche felt that most people fear their higher self because when it speaks demandingly.
You will.
Superman is a psychological projection of what Batman wishes he could be. Batman's currently struggling to keep Gotham safe, but he feels hopeless, while Superman is able to fly great distances and take care of threats. But Batman is not like the masses. He's a superhero, one that will talk back to his higher self.
Well, here I am.
So Batman is threatened. Instead of encouraging dialogue like the Senator, he's not going to take Superman to his man cave and have a talk over coffee. He's going to mother-flipping kill Superman. In other words, his goal is to become his higher self. In order to develop into that higher self, Nietzsche believed that one must first have an ultimate goal, an organizing idea. But that goal is not as important as the difficulty of that organizing idea.
And we have to destroy him.
It's suicide.
Batman's goal is not to get as ripped as Superman. His goal is to destroy Superman. Nietzsche understood that the greater the goal, the greater one becomes. Ultimately, Batman becomes what Nietzsche calls an ÜBERMENSCH, in Overman, a spiritual Superman. Batman's nihilism is purged towards the end of the film when he sees a connection beyond space and time with the two Marthas. His purpose for destruction is obliterated, and a new purpose seems to take over. He begins to think of uniting others, specifically others with superpowers, the Justice League. I really hope that Nightmare's Superman becomes a reality in the sequels.
No one stays good in this world.
Nietzsche believed that there was an important benefit to being afflicted with nihilism. For some, it forces them to break away from their previous beliefs and find an even greater purpose on Earth. Now think about the implications of what Nietzsche believes. From our objective viewpoint, Superman is a godlike being that only cares about his personal relationships. But if he ever becomes wrought with nihilism and awakens from it, he could become an even greater superhero if he was driven to accomplish goals as immensely difficult as Batman's. Eventually, Batman manifests himself into Nietzsche's will to power. It sounds badass, I know, but to understand will to power, we have to understand what will is. Nietzsche was inspired by philosopher Schopenhauer's thoughts on will. Batman has many dream sequences. Schopenhauer felt that the world exists in the brain. We perceive space and time through intuition and causality, how one thing affects another, through understanding. Now really think about that. I'm sure everyone has heard the saying that it's all in your head, especially when it refers to an anxiety you have, or your perception is your reality when you're having a difficult moment that you're trying to overcome. There's even medical terms that describe how the mind affects the body, such as the placebo effect and psychosomatic disorders. Well, Batman v Superman does something really trippy and thought-provoking. Bruce Wayne has what appears to be a nightmare of Superman killing him. He wakes up, has a vision of the Flash warning him that his dream may be a precognition, a flash forward in time. So if his dream was real, and if his dream affected his current reality, basically space and time was affected by another perception, an external sensation, the Flash, could that affect Batman's reality? A causality? I know this is a hard one to understand, but what was in Bruce Wayne's head was really reality.
You're right about him! You've always been right about him!
I'm sure the director, writer, and film editor, David Brenner, made that series of events purposely puzzling. It was intentional. If dreams have causality to our current reality, and our current reality is only an interpretation of our mind, how much more important are dreams? Have you ever had the same dream as someone else? Or maybe had a dream about something random and moments later it became reality. Scientists may try to debunk my thoughts and call it out as being a coincidence, but that shows a limitation of science, because calling those causalities a coincidence only provided an answer based on a mechanistic view of the world. Philosophy goes beyond what can be measured by tools and attempts to explain the unmeasurable. If you stop at a finite answer, it closes your mind off to infinite possibilities. For example, a telescope is a scientific instrument that gathers, magnifies, and focuses light, and is most often pointed at the sky to observe objects. A person can do all the scientific measurements they want about stars and have an objective view of the sky, but a person without any instruments other than their philosophical mind can view the stars and our sun, and with imagination claim that the stars are just distant suns, which opens up an infinite view of what they are observing. Bruce Wayne's external sensations such as Diana Prince capturing his attention or Superman destroying a city, combined with his inner experiences, his flashbacks, demonstrate Bruce Wayne's desire to survive and hook up with the ladies. This is an example of Schopenhauer's idea that our body, both externally and internally, is the expression of will. If you get mugged walking through a certain street and you have emotional flashbacks or nightmares of that certain street, your subconscious mind is telling you to avoid that certain street to survive. That's proof that your being is programmed and enslaved by will. It goes the same way with positive experiences too. Maybe you stand up against a bully, which results in receiving a compliment by a hot babe, and then later on you have daydreams of sexing it up with that hot babe. And those internal thoughts inspire you in real life to stand up against more bullies. Yeah, your whole being is a Frankenstein of will. Superman kills a Kryptonian Zod. Lex uses Zod's body to create Doomsday. Doomsday kills Superman. Every being in this sequence of events is a manifestation of will. Seen as a whole, everything is one. Just look at nature. Living organisms live off other living organisms. A dog takes a dump. That poop has nutrients to help a seed grow into a plant. And that plant is eaten by a bird. And then a human chops his head off to cook a meal. And then they feed that dog the leftovers. Ultimately, everything is one. Because of this causality, Schopenhauer believed will was inherently demonic. One thing destroys another, and violence is constant in the will to survive. Lois Lane has a will that's driving her to seek the truth about a bullet. The Senator has a will that's driving her to bring Superman before a tribunal. Batman and Lex obviously have wills too. Every freaking person has will. You watching this YouTube video have your own will. It's will-sucking city. Schopenhauer had will, but he also had deep pessimism. Schopenhauer believed that everyone's current state was always in despair, and happiness was only realized when we think of positive moments in the past or positive outcomes in the future. Lois Lane is always in despair trying to achieve her goals. She has past accomplishments, and looking towards the future, she envisions satisfaction. Schopenhauer felt that once a goal is actually achieved, pessimism takes over. We fall into boredom. And pessimism is only a preliminary form of nihilism. Sucks, right? So Batman does a lot of thinking and dreaming in this movie. His world is chaotic. Shoot, maybe your world is chaotic too. Car accidents happen. Arguments break out over politics. Well, Schopenhauer believed that within the mind, these experiences, these objects in space and time rely on our mind for existence. It's our mind that puts together these chaotic events and finds a way to give it causal relationships. Right now, as you're watching this video, I'm trying to take events some other artists created and trying to connect those events with philosophical ideas, further altering your own perception of what you just saw. Maybe you thought this movie was bullcrap, but now you're thinking, oh man, this movie is filled with philosophy smack. I'm appearing in this video trying to alter your consciousness, much in the same way the Flash appeared to Bruce Wayne after he dreamt of Nightmare Superman and his perception changed from, it was just a dream, to, oh fudge, that was the future, bro. The human mind is kind of freaky if you think about it. When we have euphoric experiences watching movies, listening to stories, experiencing music during the sunrise at a festival like Burning Man, those experiences take us out of despair. Schopenhauer assessed that in the moment of appreciating something outside of our space and time, we lose our sense of will and become a disinterested spectator. We break away from being enslaved of the will within. Batman, Superman, everyone's natural state is trapped under the thumb of one's will, where despair and boredom grip us. Schopenhauer felt that will can be suppressed with one's intellect, one's mind. You know, the same mind that organizes sensations and memories to create reality. That same mind can also be used to master one's will. Superman may feel conflicted and filled with nihilism, but his intellect is telling him to save everyone he can. Schopenhauer describes this as understanding that we are all one. Sadly though, as we saw in the movie, anger arises when Superman knows that he can't save everyone. In the theatrical cut, not the other BS cut, Superman eventually becomes indifferent and allows everyone to die in the explosion at the tribunal. Schopenhauer believed that this asceticism was what happens when one denies their own existence of will. By the way, some other examples of indifference are Buddhists who believe the current state of reality is nothing and they leave philosophy to embrace mysticism, like Doctor Strange. Now that was a fantastic Marvel movie, especially if you've ever experienced the doors of perception. They did such a great job with psychedelic visuals, but I wish they did more with psychedelic sound design, with things just pop, 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 pop all over the place. Batman says his parents taught him that the world only makes sense if you force it to. Pretty aggro way to live life, right? Batman's actions have much to do with the idea of Nietzsche's will to power. Nietzsche's perspective was different from Schopenhauer. I spent some time explaining Schopenhauer's views on one's will to live, which was driven by internal experiences of survival and sex. Nietzsche, on the other hand, believed that every organism has an insatiable desire to manifest power. Nietzsche thought the end of all living things is growth, to become more, not just to preserve itself. Batman literally embarks on a suicide mission if you think about it. He decides to challenge someone who has otherworldly physical strength. Batman is not a happy-go-lucky Marvel character throwing down snarky comments at bad guys.
That thing does not obey the laws of physics at all.
He's as serious as nuts. As Batman sets out to take on his seemingly impossible goal, he'll encounter resistances, waking up with a hangover from expensive wine, pain, getting punched by Superman, suffering, constant nightmares of his parents' death, thwarted plans, forgiving Superman. Batman has massive inner strength and desire, which is necessary for growth and increasing one's power. Compare this to... I got 10,000 steps. Just talking, moving around my video. That's pretty funny. Compare this to Marvel's Spider-Man, who's basically a man-child who must understand that with great power comes great responsibility.
Are you afraid that I'm gonna turn into some kind of criminal?
Compare this to Batman, who must live in a great way, even an irresponsible way, to enable the growth of power. Yeah, irresponsible. This dude is busting people up left and right in this movie that stands in the way of his great passion. This is intrinsically a much darker philosophy, which results in a much more depressing tone. compared to other superhero movies. I hope you agree after watching my video up to this point that Batman v Superman is appropriately serious and somber.
Tell me, do you embrace the dark side? You will.
Batman as well as Lex Luthor are hell-bent on overcoming resistances that stand in the way of their great passions. These two are very much alike from that perspective. Nietzsche felt that all life must overcome itself. Superman is a physically strong being, but Nietzsche would argue that he is not truly powerful, mainly because Superman can't think for himself and has limited passions. Lex appears to use knowledge to gain power over others. Again, Nietzsche would argue that even that is not very powerful. Batman, though, his character is a manifestation of will to power. Nietzsche argues that the ultimate form of power is psychological and spiritual. It's the power over oneself. Nietzsche felt that the most weakest characters exhibited cowardice, and the most valuable to humanity were ones devoted to self-overcoming. Compared to Superman, men are fragile and can physically die from attempting to overcome themselves.
You're not brave. Men are brave.
By setting a monumental goal and fighting for it with all his physical and mental strength, Bruce Wayne's life is an example of self-overcoming.
It's suicide.
Why did you say that, Zack?
One can even see this behavior in other Chris Nolan films. Not so much in the Lego Batman movie.
Do you want to talk about how you're feeling?
What? No!
I really actually like that movie a lot because I'm all about my abs too. In the future films of the DC Extended Universe, I'm going to guess that they will continue with this theme of power further. Many of the greatest films, pieces of music, paintings have symbols, themes, and patterns woven into their structure. Can you guess what the greatest piece of art is? It's your own life. I believe you should try to uncover the patterns that pop up in your daily existence to discover personal themes that have modeled your view of reality. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I actually spent the last few years developing my own productivity system in the form of a daily planner, and it's not an archaic to-do list or old-fashioned time management program. It's a technology for mastering your actions. This is something I think Nietzsche would be down with. I'll have that video done very soon.